She was just a maid with a broken past. He was a billionaire with a lonely heart. But one unexpected deal changed everything. What happens when love crosses the line between class and soul? Stay till the end. This story will break your heart and heal it too. The city never slept, but Claire Thompson was always more tired than New York itself. Each morning, she woke at 5 a.m. in a tiny one-bedroom apartment she shared with her younger brother, Adam, who was recovering from a rare heart condition. She made coffee in silence, tied her long honey-blonde hair in a bun, and headed out into the cold air with her cleaning supplies in hand. Every day was the same: dust, scrub, sweep, repeat. But Claire never complained. Her mother had raised her to be strong, even after she passed when Claire was only 16. With no father around and no college degree, Claire had taken whatever job she could to keep Adam alive. Her next client was someone she'd never met, Ethan Royce, one of New York's most powerful billionaires. He owned half the skyline, newspapers said. He was young, rich, and untouchable. When she stepped into his penthouse, she was stunned. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city. The walls were sleek, the floors polished, and every surface screamed wealth. But what caught her attention wasn't the view, it was the man himself. Ethan stood by the glass, wearing a black suit that looked tailored to perfection. His jaw was sharp, his eyes cold yet curious, and he had an air of loneliness around him that no money could hide. She greeted him softly. "Good morning, Mr. Royce." He only nodded, offering a short glance before returning to his tablet. For the next few days, Claire cleaned quietly while he worked from home. But he noticed her. Not just the way she moved with grace, or how she hummed while dusting bookshelves. He noticed her kindness. How she fed the stray cat outside his building, how she left food in the elevator for the janitor. She didn't belong in this world of glass and power, but somehow she glowed in it. One evening, while the city lights blinked below and soft jazz played in the background, Ethan finally spoke. "Do you believe people can change their fate?" Claire was taken aback. She looked up from folding towels. "I think, if we fight hard enough, maybe." He nodded slowly, then turned to face her. "What if I told you I want a child? Not a wife, not a girlfriend, just a family." Claire blinked. "You want to adopt?" "No," he said firmly. "I want someone to carry my child, a surrogate." Then he paused, his voice dropping. "I want that person to be you." Silence, long and thick. Claire stared at him, not sure if this was a cruel joke. "You don't even know me," she said softly. "I know enough," he replied. "You're honest, healthy, brave, and most of all, you care." Claire swallowed hard. Her heart raced. Was he serious? He leaned against the kitchen counter, eyes never leaving hers. "I'll cover everything, medical care, a place to stay, and I'll pay you $500,000. Her breath caught. $500,000. That could save Adam's life. It could give them both a future. But it wasn't just money. This was her body, her life, her heart. "I need time," she whispered. "Take all the time you need," Ethan replied. "This is your choice. No pressure, ever." That night, Claire couldn't sleep. The city hummed below her, but all she heard was Ethan's voice. She looked at Adam, who was asleep beside her, tubes in his nose and fear written on his fragile face. She held his hand, silently crying. She wanted to save him. She had to. The next morning, she stood in front of Ethan's door with trembling hands. He opened it before she could knock, as if he knew she'd come. "I'll do it," she said, "but only if I'm treated like a person, not a contract." Ethan's expression softened and something shifted in his eyes. "You have my word," he said. "This won't be cold. It'll be human." Neither of them knew then that this deal, born from desperation, would soon rewrite their lives forever. Not as strangers, not as partners in a contract, but as two broken hearts learning how to beat again, together. The office was too bright, too white. Claire sat stiffly in a leather chair, fingers fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve. Across the long glass table sat Ethan, dressed in a navy suit, calm as ever. Between them lay a thick stack of documents, Contracts, legal terms, and fertility clauses that made everything feel less human and more mechanical. The lawyer explained every detail like it was business, because to him, it was. Claire nodded along, though the words felt distant. Non-disclosure, parental rights, medical conditions. When she was asked to sign, she paused. Her fingers trembled. Then she looked up. Ethan's gaze met hers, steady, unreadable, yet not unkind. He didn't rush her. He simply said, "Only if you're sure." Claire exhaled. For her brother's life. For the hope of something more. She picked up the pen and signed. The ink was wet, but the deal was sealed. She was officially going to carry Ethan Royce's child. Within a week, she moved into Ethan's mansion, a stunning estate on the Hudson River, wrapped in trees and whispers. It had marble floors, golden chandeliers, and windows that looked out over endless sky. But luxury didn't chase away loneliness. Claire's room was on the east wing. Ethan's was on the west. The staff was polite but distant, and the silence in the hallways often felt heavy. Ethan was never unkind, but he was guarded, always behind a book, a screen, a schedule. Still, he never ignored her. He asked if she was comfortable, if the food was right, if she needed anything. But Claire wanted more than comfort. She wanted to understand him. At night, she wandered through the mansion quietly. Once she found him at the grand piano in the parlor. His back to her, his fingers moving like poetry across the keys. He played a soft, aching melody, like a memory he couldn't let go. She didn't interrupt, she just listened. Another day, she followed him without meaning to. She'd gone out to the city, craving air, and saw his car parked near a shelter. From across the street, she watched him inside, handing out meals, sitting with people no one else saw. No press, no cameras, just Ethan, just humanity. That night, she looked at him differently. Beneath the money and stone exterior, there was a man with pain, and with kindness. Maybe he was as alone as she was. Their conversations grew slowly. They spoke about books, music, travel dreams they never lived. He told her how he lost his mother to cancer, how his father raised him to believe weakness was failure. Claire told him about her mother's laughter, about Adam's sickness, and about being afraid of her future. One evening, after a routine doctor's visit, Claire stopped by the nurse's desk to pick up her file. Ethan waited nearby, pretending to read a magazine. But then he heard the nurse's soft voice. "She's never been with anyone," the nurse whispered to her colleague. "She's a virgin." Ethan's heart paused. The words echoed. He turned pale. It wasn't shock in the way most men might react. It was something else. Guilt, confusion, even reverence. She had offered herself, her body, for this deal, without ever having known love. She had given something sacred, and he had turned it into paperwork. That night he couldn't sleep. He paced by the windows, staring at the stars as if searching for an answer. He thought of Claire, her laughter in the kitchen, the way she touched every corner of the house with warmth. She wasn't just a woman carrying a child, she was real. She was brave, and untainted by the world that had made him so cold. He walked past her room, hesitated, then turned away. He would not touch that door, not until she wanted him to. The IVF was scheduled for the following week, but Ethan felt something changing inside him. A voice louder than logic, whispering that this wasn't about contracts anymore. This wasn't just a deal. It was becoming something deeper, something terrifying, something beautiful. And he wasn't sure how much longer he could keep pretending he didn't care. Ethan stood by the window as the city lights shimmered like stars scattered across glass. But his mind wasn't on the skyline. It was on Claire. He hadn't slept, not a minute. His body ached with the weight of guilt and realization. The words from the nurse replayed like a whisper stuck in time. She's never been with anyone. Claire, a virgin, untouched not because of shame, but because of hope. Because somewhere deep inside, she believed in love, in waiting for something real, something sacred, and he had turned that purity into a transaction, a contract, a business deal. How cruel that must have felt, how heavy. She had offered him her trust, her body, and he had nearly responded with sterile rooms and clinical procedures. He couldn't let it happen. By morning, his decision was clear. Not from impulse, but from something deeper, respect, awe, maybe even the beginning of love. Claire sat across from him at the breakfast table, gently stirring tea she hadn't yet sipped. She looked tired, but peaceful. Her eyes carried the quiet strength he admired more than he could say. "Claire," he began, voice softer than usual. "Can we talk?" She looked up, instantly alert. "Of course." He swallowed hard, unsure how to even begin. "I know we have a plan, the IVF procedure, the clinic." She nodded slowly. He paused, then said it straight from the heart. "But last night I realized something. It doesn't feel right anymore, not for us." Her brows gently drew together, confusion flashing in her eyes. "What do you mean?" He leaned forward, hands clasped on the table, his voice trembling just slightly. "I mean, Claire, what if we didn't do this in a hospital room? What if we let this happen the natural way?" Silence. Time slowed. Claire stared at him, lips slightly parted, heat rushing to her cheeks. "You mean you and I?" He nodded. "Yes, but only if you feel okay with that. Not as part of the contract, not because I paid you, but because I can't treat you like a transaction. You're more than that to me now." Claire's heart thudded in her chest. The world blurred for a moment. She had imagined many things in her life, but not this. Not a billionaire looking at her like she was the only thing that made sense in his world of glass and steel. She searched his face for any trace of manipulation, pressure, or coldness. She found none. Just honesty, softness, a hint of something she couldn't yet name, but it warmed her like sunlight. "Ethan," she whispered, "I never thought this would feel like something beautiful, but with you it does." Her voice shook. "I trust you." A breath escaped his lips, one he hadn't realized he was holding. He nodded gently. No celebration, no grin, just deep, grateful understanding. That night, he invited her to the rooftop garden, his private place, hidden from the world. It was wrapped in vines and moonlight, with soft jazz playing low from old speakers tucked behind rose bushes. The stars looked close enough to touch. They sat on a velvet blanket beside a stone fountain. She wore a pale blue dress that fluttered in the breeze. He wore a white shirt, sleeves rolled up, heart wide open. They didn't rush. They talked, they laughed. They watched the sky change color as the moon drifted between clouds. And when he finally reached for her hand, her fingers laced perfectly between his. When he kissed her, it wasn't fire. It was home. It was quiet, slow, aching, like two souls recognizing each other in the dark. And when they lay together, wrapped in each other beneath a blanket of stars, there was no shame, no fear, no transaction, only warmth, only trust, only silent promises written in the way he touched her face, and the way she whispered his name like a prayer. That night, they didn't just create the chance for new life. They created something sacred, something even rarer than love, connection. The mornings had never felt warmer. Sunlight spilled through Claire's windows like golden silk, and every day now began with soft knockings and the scent of cinnamon French toast, Ethan's new obsession since she had once casually mentioned she liked it. She laughed more, so did he. They cooked together in the kitchen, him awkwardly chopping vegetables, her teasing him every time he messed up. He always messed up on purpose just to hear her laugh again. The mansion, once cold and distant, now echoed with life. Their life. Claire's belly began to show in the second month. Her hands instinctively touched it when she walked. Ethan would glance at it with wonder, as if he still couldn't believe a tiny heartbeat lived inside her. Inside them. They watched black and white movies at night under thick blankets on the velvet couch. Ethan insisted on popcorn, even when Claire fell asleep halfway through every film. He never minded. He just watched her sleep and whispered promises he never had the courage to say out loud. "I think I'm falling for you," he would murmur, only to the dark. Claire shared stories of her childhood, how she used to sleep with her shoes on during tornado season, how Adam once glued his hands together trying to make a toy sword. Ethan told her how he learned piano on rainy nights because the sound drowned out his parents shouting. They shared memories like old friends, and they kissed like new lovers. Claire painted in the garden now, a hobby she had almost forgotten. Ethan sometimes just sat and watched, mesmerized not by the brush strokes but by her. He had never known a woman like Claire, kind, fierce, full of light, and he had never felt like this before. Not with anyone, not even close, but buried deep in Ethan's chest was a ghost, his father. A cruel, controlling man who wore suits like armor and measured love in dollar signs. He had raised Ethan to be ruthless, and before dying, he had looked Ethan in the eye and said, "If you ever marry below our name, if you embarrass this family with a servant girl, you'll lose everything. I made sure of it." It had been a threat, but more than that, a trap. His father's will gave control of the company to a board of shareholders, all bound by that clause. If Ethan married someone beneath his class, he could lose the company overnight. Ethan tried to ignore it, to bury it. But as he watched Claire cradle her growing belly, joy shining in her eyes, fear crept in. He didn't want to lose her. But he also didn't want to destroy the empire he had spent his entire life building. He told himself he had time, that he would figure it out. But secrets never stay quiet forever. One evening, Claire walked past his study. She wasn't trying to eavesdrop, just looking for him to ask if he wanted dessert. But she heard voices through the slightly open door. Ethan's lawyer was on speakerphone. You know what your father's will says, Ethan. If you marry her, a maid, the board will vote you out. You'll lose the company." Claire froze. Silence. Then Ethan's voice, heavy with exhaustion. "I know." Those two words sliced through her like glass. She didn't wait to hear more. The dessert plate in her hand trembled, and she turned away, numb, her heart shattering quietly. Was she just a beautiful mistake? A passing moment in his world? A story he would one day tuck away behind a boardroom table? That night she didn't cry, she packed. A small bag, just what she came with. She left no trace, just a single note on his nightstand, folded gently, written with a trembling hand. "Thank you for showing me love. I hope your child brings you joy. Goodbye." By the time the sun rose, Claire was gone. And Ethan? He stood in the doorway of her empty room, holding the note with fingers that shook. For the first time in years, the billionaire who had everything felt what it was like to lose what truly mattered. Ethan's mansion had never felt so cold. Without Claire, the rooms were just spaces, beautiful, empty spaces. He read her note 100 times. He held it like a lifeline, his fingers trembling, his heart sinking deeper with each hour she was gone. He didn't cry, not at first, but the silence tore through him like knives. He checked the security footage. She had left at 2:14 a.m. No car, no goodbye, no trace. Panic kicked in, then came the guilt, then desperation. He called every contact he had, private investigators, former staff, even her old landlord. Days turned to weeks, and still, nothing. His company meetings became shorter. His emails went unread. He couldn't focus. Not when she was out there, pregnant with their child, carrying the only real joy he'd ever known. He looked at the piano and couldn't touch it. The keys were mute without her voice humming in the background. Then finally, a break. A call came from a retired maid who had once worked at the same agency Claire had started with. "She's in Oregon, small town, working at a diner." Before the woman finished the sentence, Ethan was already booking a flight. 3 hours later, he was driving through a quiet town where the trees kissed the sky and no one cared about last names. There were no glass towers here, no board meetings, no photographers. Just life, quiet, real life. He found her at the diner. She wore a plain apron, her blonde hair in a loose braid, her face glowing in a way that hurt him to see. 6 months pregnant, still radiant, still Claire. She didn't see him at first. He watched her refill coffee cups with gentle grace. She smiled at a tired trucker. She kissed a napkin and handed it to a crying child. Every gesture reminded him of the woman he had fallen in love with. Then their eyes met. Claire froze. The coffee pot trembled in her hand. Her breath caught. He stood just inside the door, not moving. She blinked once, twice, like she didn't believe he was real. Ethan stepped forward. He didn't speak right away. He simply looked at her, every emotion flooding his eyes. "Why did you leave?" he finally asked, voice cracking. Claire set the pot down, pressing a hand to her swollen belly. Her lips parted, but her throat felt tight. "I didn't want to be your mistake," she said quietly. I heard the call. I know what your father's will said. I know what the board thinks of me. Ethan took another step, then another, until he was inches away. You think you were a mistake? He whispered. She looked down. I didn't belong in your world. I never did. Then Ethan dropped to his knees. Right there, in the middle of the diner, in front of strangers and soft jazz music and 1,000 unspoken regrets. Then I'll leave that world, he said. Claire gasped. I already did, he continued, his voice shaking. I sold half the company, gave up my seat on the board, walked away from everything my father built, everything that chained me. Tears filled her eyes. Why? He looked up at her, broken and whole all at once. Because none of it matters without you. Not the money, not the name, not the empire. You weren't just the woman carrying my child. Claire, you are my home. The diner was quiet now. People watched in silence, some pretending not to stare, but neither of them noticed. She knelt with him, one hand on her belly, one on his cheek. Their foreheads touched. You really gave it all up? She whispered. I'd give it all up again, he said. Every dollar, every title. I only want one legacy now, us. Claire's tears slipped silently down her cheeks. She didn't say yes, she didn't say no. She just kissed him, softly, deeply, as if the world had finally stopped punishing two hearts who simply wanted to belong. And for the first time in their lives, they were free. Autumn painted the trees in gold and rust, and the sky looked like soft watercolor. The wind was crisp, the air smelled of apples and old leaves, and somewhere in the distance church bells rang. Claire stood beneath an arch of wildflowers, her white dress flowing like a quiet river. Her belly, round with life, made her glow with something ancient and beautiful. Not just a bride, not just a mother-to-be, but a woman who had risen from the shadows of poverty and heartbreak into light. Ethan stood across from her, no tuxedo, no luxury, just a simple white shirt, open at the collar, and eyes that held nothing back. He had lost the corporate empire, but in its place he had found something far richer: love, family, truth. The ceremony was small, just Claire's brother Adam, a few neighbors, and an old jazz singer Ethan had hired after hearing him play on a street corner. There were no headlines, no photographers, just smiles, handwritten vows, and one quiet promise between two souls. I choose you, not for what the world sees, but for what I see when the world is quiet. 3 months later, in the peaceful glow of winter's approach, their daughter was born. They named her Hope, and no name had ever fit more perfectly. Ethan wept when he held her for the first time. His hands, once used to signing billion-dollar deals, now cradled this tiny, pink-fisted miracle. Claire laughed through tears, watching the man who once seemed untouchable become the softest version of himself. She has your eyes, he whispered. No, Claire said, smiling. She has our heart. But their story didn't end in quiet comfort. It grew. Inspired by Claire's strength and the child they created through love, not power, Ethan wrote a book. A simple children's story, filled with warmth and wonder. He called it The Maid and the Millionaire. It wasn't about money. It was about two people from different worlds who met, healed, and built a bridge where no one thought one could stand. The book became a quiet sensation. Instead of keeping the royalties, Ethan donated every cent to shelters for single mothers, women's clinics, and education programs for underserved girls. But he didn't stop there. He founded a charity called Claire's Light. Its mission? To break down class barriers, to give women from humble beginnings the resources to rise, to remind people that a job title doesn't define worth and love isn't limited to social status. Ethan began speaking at schools, shelters, even boardrooms. He told his story, not as a billionaire, but as a man who had once lived behind walls of pride and privilege. My father taught me that legacy was about power, he said one night at a foundation gala. But Claire taught me it's about love, humility, and the courage to stand beside someone the world may overlook. The world listened. Some criticized, some rolled their eyes, but many, many were moved. Because Claire and Ethan's story wasn't just romance, it was revolution. They raised hope in a quiet town where no one cared about last names or balance sheets. They spent weekends helping at food banks. They danced in the kitchen to old Frank Sinatra songs. They built a life that was simple, yet rich in every way that mattered. And when people asked, "Do you really think love can cross that big a divide?" Ethan would smile and say, "Love doesn't cross the divide, it erases it." Because in a world still aching from division, of class, race, status, and fear, their story became a reminder of one powerful truth. We are all worthy of love, no matter where we come from, not because of what we have, but because of who we choose to become.